Hey there everybody, it's Ryan Liberty, and in this video I'm going to talk about 10 myths about emotional abuse. Oh.
Ooh, ah.
Okay, so we're going to get into what 10 myths about emotional abuse are. Before I do, I just want to mention that, we are talking about emotional abuse here, so if abuse in any way is triggering for you, you may want to shut the video off and come back to it at a time when you're more comfortable hearing about this. If you never feel like you're going to be comfortable hearing about this, that's okay. You don't have to watch the video. No pressure. Also, since we are talking about emotional abuse, I'm going to get to this, but it is a pattern. It's not something that, we all do a little bit of emotional abuse, but it's something that must be repeated over and over again consistently for it to actually be considered emotional abuse. We all do some little things here and there. You can admit it. And the last thing I want to say is if you find that you are in an abusive situation, find the support that you need. There is support out there. You have friends, family, there's domestic violence shelters, there are helplines, there are counselors, therapists, there's plenty of support out there for you. I certainly urge you to seek out that support, online support groups, because it's necessary. If you're in this kind of a situation, you need support, and I would love to see you have support and have guidance as you go through what you're going through right now. So with that out of the way, let's get into what the 10 myths of emotional abuse are. So I've got them written down. I took some time to think about these here, and the first one is that emotional abuse is normal. It is not normal. So let's get into that. A lot of people grew up feeling like this is the way things are. It's normal to yell and scream at somebody. It's normal to blame people for us hurting them. Like all these behaviors, gaslighting and silent treatment, all those kinds of things, that may have just been present in our household. It may have been present in our neighborhood. And so we grow up thinking, well, that's just the way the world is, but that's not the way the world is. And it's not normal, it's not healthy, so that is the first myth. Do not normalize emotional abuse, please. The second myth is that if somebody's emotionally abusing us, that it means that they care about us. And again, not true. I think this comes from that old saying of like, well, if the little girl or the little boy is picking on you in the playground, then they're picking on you because they like you. And there may be some truth to that. There may be some truth that people who emotionally abuse us, they care about us in some way, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be in our lives at all. But it's not like a loving situation. What I want to make clear here is that if somebody's doing something abusive to you, if emotional abuse is abusive, that's not love. Love looks nothing like that at all. So if you're feeling like this is the way that love happens, then you have a skewed view on what love and care is. And I'd urge you to reconsider that and start questioning in yourself, why do I feel that this kind of behavior is loving and acceptable? Because it's not. It's just not. So again, if you need support with that, go out and seek support, but it is not caring for somebody to be emotionally abusive to you. The third thing is that it is deserved when we have emotional abuse done to us. And again, I think this comes from a lot of times we grow up in families and we get that message that look at what you made me do, that kind of a thing. It gets passed down to us as the reason why we were abused. Mommy had to hit you because you were misbehaving, or daddy had to yell at you because you did such and such a thing, you didn't get good grades, or whatever. The reason doesn't really matter. What matters is that we believe that it's somehow our fault that it's happening to us. And later in life, we get into abusive friendships, abusive workplaces, abusive relationships, and we start to feel like, well, if I just worked a little harder, if I loved them a little bit more, then I wouldn't be deserving of this, and that's not true. You just don't deserve it, period. Nobody ever deserves emotional abuse. So that is the third myth. The fourth myth when it comes to emotional abuse is that it's easy to walk away. This one frustrates me quite a bit because people think, well, and this goes hand in hand with the one I just said, that you deserve it. Well, you deserve it because you stayed. The fact of the matter is that when there's an abusive relationship going on, sometimes there's a process going on called traumatic bonding, where there's a cycle of abuse where somebody will abuse us emotionally and then turn around, say they're sorry, and then start treating us really well, and then go back to abusing us and treating us well, abusing us and treating us well. And what happens is it becomes a cyclical pattern, and there becomes these highs and lows, and just like when you're playing like a slot machine and it gets really exciting, and then you win something, you get really excited, right? And then so you keep spinning, but you keep losing, and it's like, oh crap, this really sucks, I'm losing. But then you get another win, and it gets you excited, and you want to do it again, and it becomes this addictive process, and you can't leave that slot machine, for example. This is why gambling can be very difficult. It's very true of relationships as well. It becomes confusing because you don't know if things are going to change. This person acted lovingly towards you at some point in the past. Sometimes people have financial entwinements with people. There's a lot of reasons why it could be difficult for somebody to walk away. So it is not deserved because somebody stayed with somebody that's emotionally abusing somebody, and it's not easy to walk away. There are many factors that prevent people from walking away, so just keep that in mind. The fifth myth about emotional abuse is that it's easy to spot. We think of emotional abuse as like yelling and screaming, and that's not true. I mean, that is emotional abuse, of course, but there are other forms of emotional abuse. You know, silent treatment is emotional abuse, and you as an outside observer may never even see that. You know, sometimes you'll see a couple and they'll look happy and loving out in the open in public, but then behind closed doors, you've got things like silent treatment going on. You've got screaming and yelling, name calling, gaslighting, where people are just plain lying and bending the other person's reality. So it's not always something that's so clear-cut and detectable. It's very confusing sometimes for the person who's going through it, again, because there's a lot of loving moments, and then sometimes emotional abuse, wish I could say this so cleanly, but it's really hard to cleanly say. Sometimes emotional abuse is very, very subtle. It's a look. It's a sneaky little backhanded, passive-aggressive jab that nobody else would understand except for the person who it was directed at. So it can be done very covertly, very sneaky. Something else that I've observed and experienced is that the person who's doing the emotional abuse can tell everybody else one thing and scapegoat and blame the person who's being abused as being abusive, and then things get really hairy because people don't understand who is actually being abusive. So it's not so easy to spot it. There is a difficulty sometimes, but that doesn't mean that it's not significant and it shouldn't be addressed. So the sixth myth about emotional abuse is that only certain kinds of people do it. That is not true. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, we all do things that are a little bit emotionally abusive. If you've ever yelled at somebody, if you've ever been a little bit passive-aggressive, if you've ever lied about something, you know, there is like a healthy range of doing those things. But it's when it's a pattern that it becomes emotional abuse. And any of us can slip into that pattern. It's not like, well, it's only crazy people, I hate that word, or, you know, sociopaths, or whatever word you want to use. Anybody, any color, any occupation, children, adults, there's no limitation to who could be emotionally abusive. So that is a myth. Also, number 7 myth, I gotta get through this video, we're already at 9 minutes. Abusers are monsters. They're people, they're not monsters. So just, no, abusers are not monsters, they're people. Sometimes they have problems, and we're gonna get into that, but no, abusers are not monsters, they are people. Let's just be clear about what we're talking about. The 8th myth about emotional abuse is that they're doing it on purpose. Sometimes emotional abuse is not done on purpose, and I'm going to get to why a little bit later, but sometimes people are not aware of what they're doing, and it's very unfortunate because people are being harmed, but they just don't know. So I just want to put that out there. The 9th myth about emotional abuse is that if you ignore it, it's going to go away or it's going to fix itself. That is not true. Very often when emotional abuse is going on, this is something that's been going on for a long time, and ignoring it is actually what perpetuates it. I always like to say that abuse thrives in isolation. When you isolate it, when you ignore it, when you pretend like it's not going on, that allows it to continue because nobody's challenging it, nobody's seeing that there's a problem, and everybody's just going along with it. So ignoring it will not get rid of emotional abuse. It has to be addressed in some way, shape, or form, whether that be to remove yourself from it or to, if you're the person doing it or you know somebody doing it, therapy being involved, something's got to change. You can't just ignore it. And the 10th and final thing about emotional abuse, the 10th myth, is that it's just a set of bad habits. And, that's maybe slightly true. We may learn these habits in childhood, but very often there's a personality disorder also involved. So something like a cluster B personality disorder, borderline, histrionic, narcissistic, or antisocial personality disorders. It is a pattern, and it's often learned in childhood, but it's more complicated than just breaking a bad habit. It's systemic, and it needs to really be addressed. There can be core problems with the person's identity, self-esteem, and I know sometimes it feels like, well, if we just pour enough love into this person, then they will change, they will have the desire to change. That's very often not the case. So these have been 10 myths about emotional abuse. I appreciate you for hanging in with me and learning about them. I would love to know any myths that you have to add, because I think this is an area where people have a lot of misunderstandings. So if you want to add something, please leave that below. And thank you. I really do appreciate you taking the time to learn about this today. Thank you. Hey, it's Ryan Liberty. If you liked that video, please give it a thumbs up, share with a friend, and leave any questions or comments down below, because that would really help me out. If you're somebody who's gone through a traumatic event and you're feeling cut off from the people around you, I have a free course that will help with that, so please click to get it. And if you'd like to see the rest of my videos, please click subscribe. As always, I want to remind you that your life matters. Nobody can question your worth. However it is that you're feeling, whatever it is that you're going through, it's okay, and you are loved. Thanks again for watching.